Hello everybody, Sean McMahon here. This is part 3 of our study of Isaiah chapter 1 verse 26, the restoration of the judges. Now go check out the first 2 parts if you haven't yet. Make sure you subscribe to my channel to be updated when the next part comes out, and check out some of the other studies I've done in the past while you're waiting. Now in the previous study, we saw how at the outset of Matthew 23, Jesus acknowledged that the Sanhedrin of his day, comprised of chief priests, scribes, and Pharisees, they were legitimate successors to the offices of Moses in the court of 70 elders that he established in Numbers 11. And Jesus endorses the validity of this institution, but not the godliness of its members. As Matthew 23 continues, Jesus just tears them apart. It's a devastating criticism of their character, and he pronounces woes on them. And he declares that he's going to send his own Sanhedrin out in fulfillment of Isaiah 1:26. And this Sanhedrin of Christ is the 70 disciples recorded in Luke 10. So Jesus has just sort of declared war, and he's sending his Sanhedrin out against the standing Sanhedrin. So the question we're looking at today is, how did this shake out? Could these 2 Sanhedrins coexist? One incumbent, one insurgent, shall we say? Is that how God restored the judges as he promised in Isaiah 1:26? Well, the answer is no. They couldn't coexist, and they didn't. And Jesus called this from the get-go in Matt 23 verse 34. Now listen to what he says about sending out his apostles in full. He says, "I'm sending you prophets and wise men and teachers. Some of them you will kill and crucify. Others you will flog in your synagogues and persecute in town after town." End quote. Okay, so, ouch. Now, in terms of conventional warfare, this doesn't bode well for Christ's Sanhedrin. This sounds like defeat. It's an odd threat, actually. I'm sending my men against you. You're going to kill them. You're going to crucify them. What sort of threat is that, right? Well, the answer, as it often is in context. It is a threat. Let's turn back a few verses to verse 29. He says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You build tombs for the prophets and decorate the monuments of the righteous. And you say, if we had lived in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partners with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. So you testify against yourselves that you are the sons of those who murdered the prophets." Okay, now pay special attention to this last part where he says, "Fill up, then, the measure of the sin of your fathers. You snakes, you offspring of vipers, how will you escape the judgment of Gehenna?" So Jesus is provoking them. He's calling them prophet killers. And then he invokes Jeremiah's prophecy of the day of the Lord when he says the judgment of Gehenna. Are you familiar with this prophecy? Here's what Jeremiah chapter 7, verses 30 and following say about the judgment of Gehenna. Here's what it says. "The people of Judah have done evil in my sight, declares the Lord. They've set up their abominations in the house that bears my name, and so have defiled it." So let's stop there for a second. Jeremiah is talking about the priests defiling the temple. Well, that's exactly what Jesus has been talking about in his discourse in Matthew 23. Okay? Jeremiah continues. "They have built the high places of Topheth in the valley of Hinnom." Pause. The valley of Hinnom is what is transliterated Gehenna in the New Testament. Valley of Hinnom equals Gehenna. Okay? "They have built the high places of Topheth in the valley of Hinnom so they could burn their sons and daughters in the fire, something I never commanded, nor did it ever enter my mind. So behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when this place will no longer be called Topheth and the valley of Hinnom, Gehenna, but the valley of slaughter. For they will bury the dead in Topheth until there is no more room. The corpses of this people will become food for the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth." Pause. Does this language sound familiar? It should if you read Revelation 19, because that's where the birds gorge themselves on the flesh of kings and mighty men at the marriage supper of the Lamb. Okay, moving on with Jeremiah. Jeremiah says, "There will be no one to scare them away, no one to scare the birds away. And I will remove from the cities of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem the sounds of joy and gladness and the voices of the bride and bridegroom." Pause. This is language also borrowed by John in Revelation chapter 18, verse 23 for the fall of Babylon. Do you recognize it? Let's continue with Jeremiah. "For the land will become a wasteland, That's how he ends it. Okay, let's stop there. This ends Jeremiah's prophecy. So Jesus, in referencing Jeremiah's prophecy, he just opened a can of worms. He invoked the curses, the woes of the end of the age upon these scribes, Pharisees, and hypocrites he's talking to the face. He condemned them along with their fathers, who didn't just kill the prophets, but burned their sons and daughters in the fire at Gehenna, is what Jeremiah says. And he says that they will not escape the judgment of Gehenna, which Jeremiah very clearly foretells to be the destruction of the cities of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem. The land, he says, will become a wasteland. Okay? Now, I intentionally brought in the parallels with John's revelation because it's very, very important for this study and in general that we establish that the visions which John saw are the same as those which Jeremiah saw. They were about the same event, the day of the Lord. All of the prophets spoke of this awful day, okay? When the cities of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem become a wasteland. Okay, Jesus had just invoked this same day of judgment over the heads of the evil Sanhedrin. Ouch. And it's very, very important that we understand with crystal clarity that Christ was prophesying about the end of the age as this study unfolds. And to remove any doubt that this day of the Lord was imminent and swiftly approaching, Jesus closes Matthew 23 with these words, a prophetic warning to these scribes, Pharisees, and hypocrites that he was talking to directly. He says, "Upon you will come all the righteous blood shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. Truly I tell you, all these things will come upon this generation." So there you have it. This is the fate of the ungodly Sanhedrin. Jesus said, fill up the measure of the sin of your fathers. And how are they going to do that? Well, they're going to slay Christ's Sanhedrin. They're going to complete the sins, the measure of sins which their fathers started, right? They're going to persecute, flog, crucify Christ's Sanhedrin. And for this and for the sins of their fathers, they would be destroyed on the day of judgment, which would come upon their own heads, upon their whole generation, is what Jesus says. So thus seals the fate of the evil Sanhedrin, the synagogue of Satan, right? Now the question remains as to the fate of Christ's Sanhedrin. After all, if they're all dead, how can Isaiah's prophecy about the restoration of the judges be fulfilled? What? The judges are restored for a few years, but then they're all killed by the evil Sanhedrin, who also get killed a few years later, and that's that? Some restoration. It sounds like everyone gets killed. Or is there more to it than that? We will uncover the answer to these questions in the next part. Thanks so much for listening. Please share, like, make sure you're subscribed to my channel, and turn on notifications so that you can be alerted when the next part drops. God bless you. Peace.